These are cocoons containing spiders' eggs. They were made in the autumn, and now, the following spring, it's nearly time for the new spiders to emerge. Each cocoon contains hundreds of tiny eggs, protected by a sticky ball of silk made by the mother spider. We've opened this one. The baby spiders hatch out inside the cocoon and feed on the remains of their eggs. They stay inside until they've molted for the first time, casting their tough outer skins so that they can start to grow. In early summer, the spiderlings come out into the world, and if you're lucky, you may see this happening: a cluster of little spiders which have left their cocoon and are getting ready to spread out to find homes. These are baby garden spiders, a very common kind of spider with the scientific name Araneus diadematus. At this stage, they're feeding on each other, the bigger and stronger ones eating their weaker brothers and sisters, a very good example of the survival of the fittest. They let out fine strands of silk, which float upwards in currents of warm air and stick to things higher up. Then they climb up these silken ladders. They cluster together again as a ball of spiderlings. Maybe this gives them some sort of protection against enemies. If they're disturbed, they disperse again, going still higher. Fairly soon now, they'll float away on threads of silk, and some of them will survive and land in places where they can set up home. But only a few will make it, and that's why there have to be so many eggs to start with, to make sure that at least 1 or 2 spiders survive to keep the species going. Some young garden spiders had landed in this garden hedge. They'd made their orb webs to catch insects for food, and they grow and molt and grow again. Here's one feeding on a small insect which is wrapped up in silk. These young spiders won't be fully grown until summer next year, if they last out. When they are fully grown, after many molts, they'll look like this. There were plenty of mature garden spiders in the hedge, survivors from the thousands of eggs hatched over a year ago. They're common almost everywhere, and you'll find them in many gardens. The garden spider's web is anchored firmly to twigs and leaves, a very beautiful spiral orb. Every night, the spider eats the old web and spins a new one inside the supporting framework, unless it needs to move somewhere else for a better supply of insects. Only the threads of the spiral are sticky. You can see the tiny separate blobs of gum which she spreads on them. The garden spider has a sort of oil on her feet which stops her sticking to the gummy parts of her own web. This is the signal line which runs from the spider's lair to the center of the web. If she's not actually in her web, the garden spider still keeps contact with it. Here she is, holding the line so that she'll feel any vibrations if something gets caught in the web. Like all web spiders, the garden spider lives in a world of touch. Her eyesight's poor, and she depends almost completely upon the signals she receives through the silk strands of her web. That white marking's part of the white cross on top of its abdomen. All garden spiders carry this cross, which is why they're called diadem artis, although they sometimes have differently colored bodies. If they're not at their lairs, they hang head downwards at the center of the web like this. Here's a side view. The spinnerets are at the tip of the abdomen, a set of jets through which the spider can extrude silk to make the web or to wrap up prey with, and so on. The silk comes out as a liquid, which turns solid on contact with the air, and it contains a lot of protein, so that spiders often eat their own silk after it's served its purpose. Here's a crane fly caught in a web. The spider will come to the center of the web, if she's not there already, and quickly feel for the direction the struggles are coming from, then attack. Watch. She bites and wraps it up. Many predators won't attack wasps, which have the black and yellow warning stripes that mean danger, but web spiders don't depend on sight. So what'll happen if a wasp gets caught in a garden spider's web? Here's a chance to find out. She bites, then wraps up. See that ribbon of silk like a bandage? A hoverfly. A bite, and then she twirls it round with her legs as she puts out the silk and wraps it up. And she leaves it to eat later. A crane fly. This was a lucky one. There's the silk the spider put out, ready to wrap up her victim, but that one got away. This one didn't. A crane fly is too awkward to be spun round on the web, so the spider has to go round it to bind it up. She uses her legs to draw out silk from her spinnerets. Watch how she tucks that leg in. She's leaving it there for the time being. If she's going to feed immediately, she makes a very neat parcel. This is a moth she's caught, and she takes it to the center of the web, or back to her lair. Watch. She'll eat the wrapping as well as the insect inside. The silk doesn't get wasted. This one's got a very small insect, an aphid. Like all spiders, she injects a digestive fluid into the victim and feeds on the liquid produced. She mashes it up with her jaws into a sort of soup and rejects the tough bits like the wings and outer skeleton. She sieves her food through hairs round her mouth parts. Watch her clean away some of the indigestible bits. But the garden spider won't eat any insect. This big bumblebee's got caught. The spider feels the vibrations. She attacks, but she's not wrapping it up. She's aware that it's a very big, heavy insect, and probably she doesn't like its smell and its taste. She goes back to the center of the web. The bee goes on struggling. Instinctively, the spider reacts again to the vibrations and makes another attack. It's possible that she's measuring its size with her legs. She cuts away part of the web. Another attack. And she swings away on her lifeline. She's cut the bee out of the web. And now she cleans her mouth and jaws, possibly getting rid of bits of the bee's fur. That was an insect she didn't want to eat. This is a male garden spider, smaller and spindlier than the females we've been watching. In late summer, he abandons his web, which means he'll never eat again, and goes in search of a mate. When he finds a female on her web, he signals to her by plucking at the web. There she is. He sends a sort of code of signals along the web. She'll only respond to vibrations, unlike the hunters, such as wolf spiders, which have good eyesight and use a visual courtship display. It can take a long time, but at last she moves towards him. And then goes back again. He goes on signaling. He's got to lure her off her web onto a special mating line which he's put out. Only then can he mate with her. Again she responds. He's clear of the web, on his own silk line, still signaling. It's a slow process because, acting against their sexual instinct, there's her instinct to attack anything which she can feel moving, and his instinct to avoid her. She does attack, and he drops away on a lifeline out of danger. Eventually, he may be successful. This male, on the right, has coaxed the female onto his line. But he's still keeping up his signals, still wary in case she starts to treat him as prey. He retreats. We watched for over an hour, and eventually they mated. She hangs from the thread, presenting her underside to him, and he swings forward to plunge his palps, one at a time, into her epigyne, her sexual opening. He ejected sperm and soaked it up on his palps before setting out to find a mate. Now, that sperm enters the female to fertilize her eggs. Soon he will die, but she still has the important job to do. Autumn. In this curled-up leaf, a female garden spider is settling down to lay her fertilized eggs and make a silken cocoon to keep them safe from enemies and bad weather throughout the winter. She's left her web for good, and she'll never feed again. She's made a home for the cocoon, and now she settles down to lay the hundreds of eggs from her swollen abdomen. Then, like all the other adult females we've been watching, she'll stay by her cocoon, wasting away, until in early winter, after a life of about 1 year and 3/4, she dies. Next year, the eggs will hatch, and the spider's tale will begin again.
And that brings us to the end of school's programmes for today. Indeed, for this week. We'll be back again, of course, on Monday morning at the usual time of 9:30, commencing with the programme Picture Box.